Now for a look at the state of the chip sector ahead of NVIDIA's highly anticipated earnings report later this month. Let's bring in Chris Miller, Associate Professor at Tufts Fletcher School and author of Chip War, the fight for the world's most critical technology. Chris, thanks for joining us. And I mean, we constantly go through these rounds of, U.S. government putting on export controls over some class of chips to China or others. Maybe it hits NVIDIA stock. Maybe people get concerned about the market isn't as big as we thought. And then, of course, there's some kind of response from China to try to do it themselves. Maybe just set it up in terms of what the state of play is. Is this just the world we're going to be living in for a while?
Well, we're almost 2 years into U.S. restrictions on companies like NVIDIA and their ability to sell advanced AI processors into China. And China's, of course, trying to respond to this by building their own high-end AI chips. Right now, China is still meaningfully behind. And we know this because Chinese firms are importing large volumes of the lower-end NVIDIA chips that the company still allowed to sell into China. But it's widely expected that the U.S. is going to ratchet up the restrictions at some point later this year. And we've just seen reports from the Wall Street Journal that Huawei is readying a new AI chip that's supposed to be better than the previous version and perhaps more able to compete with what NVIDIA can sell. So this is sort of a cat and mouse game. The U.S. ratchets up, China responds. And I think we should expect this to go forward far into the future.
And of course, the stated rationale is to, withhold certain technologies from China that could be used in a way that compromises U.S. national security. Do we have a sense of exactly how effective that is, how much it might restrain capabilities of other countries, how much of a head start it gives the U.S. and its allies?
Well, the difficulty with the national security rationale is that the actual focus is AI, and AI is relevant for the civilian sector. It's also relevant for intelligence agencies and the military. And so the U.S. goal is really to make it harder for China to be a leader in AI. And I think if you look at the landscape right now, it's U.S. firms who are out in front. And you can certainly get some anecdotal evidence from China that lack of access to sufficient computing power, the type of computing power provided by chips like NVIDIA's, is a challenge to China's AI researchers and to Chinese companies that are trying to scale up. And that's exactly why they're pouring billions and billions of dollars into trying to build out their own chip-making ecosystem that can compete with companies like NVIDIA.
Do we have a sense of whether that's effective? I guess I'm trying to figure out on a practical level, what the differential is going to be. And, considering that the Chinese internet is kind of closed to the rest of the world and vice versa, I just don't know exactly what we're fighting over here.
Well, I think the U.S. realizes that China's AI ecosystem will be defined by Chinese firms. But what it wants is in the rest of the world, U.S. AI firms to have a real lead. So the U.S. can set the rules of AI around the world, and so that U.S. firms create the infrastructure that undergirds AI, not just in the United States, but in other countries too. And right now, I think that's more or less playing out. If you ask who's building the data centers that are going to train and deploy AI systems, it's largely U.S. firms, even in third countries. And I think that's what the U.S. hopes to see going forward. And by restricting Chinese firms' access to high-end chips, the U.S. is hoping to keep them behind, make them less competitive in third markets, and therefore provide an advantage for U.S. players.
And Chris, as a sidebar that's, not really a sidebar, I know the defense industry in particular is somewhat frustrated that we haven't weaned our defense apparatus reliance on Chinese chips. If nothing else, it feels like maybe that's not the place to be dependent upon that supply.
I think that's right. I think the defense industry uses a wide range of chips, some pretty high end, but a lot much lower end, some chips that were designed 20, 30, even 40 years ago. And a lot of these lower end chips are produced in large volumes in China. And so it has taken a very long time for defense firms to find alternative sources of supply for some of these lower end chips.
Yeah.
And what about the effort? I mean, it's a multi-year effort to bring more manufacturing back to the U.S. or allied countries. And is that going to really shift the dynamics here? Obviously, you'd prefer to have things closer, but still it seems like Taiwan Semi and ASML seem to be the gatekeepers for this business.
Yeah, I think that's right. With the CHIPS Act, just passed 2 years ago, we've seen a major increase in investment in the US, a huge step change relative to the previous levels. But even this big increase with several $100 billion of new chip making investment in the US expected over the next decade, the reality is that almost all AI processors, like those produced by NVIDIA, are still manufactured in Taiwan and will be for the foreseeable future. So you really can't ignore Taiwan when it comes to the chip industry, because that's where almost all of the cutting edge processors are actually manufactured.
Now to the chip sector. SoftBank and Intel had been in discussions to build an AI chip that would rival NVIDIA. However, those talks broke down after Intel struggled to meet Masayoshi Son's requirements, that according to the Financial Times. The Japanese conglomerate is now reportedly talking to Taiwan Semiconductor. Now remember, Intel is aiming to compete with Taiwan Semi once its foundries are up and running here in the U.S. The story underscores the challenges companies face in trying to compete with NVIDIA. A bunch of private companies, including Grok and Cerebras, which is going public this fall, are working on rival chips. So far, Wall Street doesn't seem to be see these companies taking market share from the company. You can see NVIDIA's comeback continuing. The stock has recouped a lot of its losses. It's up just 17% this week, Tyler, and the company reports earnings on August 28th.
So SoftBank was looking to collaborate with Intel, not to take over Intel.
That's exactly right. Work with Intel hand in hand to be able to produce an AI chip that would compete with NVIDIA. But again, it doesn't seem like that is going anywhere. As the FT was reporting, they had some troubles working with Intel on that.
All righty.
All right, let's talk about NVIDIA and the rest of the market. So today, the market breathed a sigh of relief following this morning's economic data. Now, I'll be honest in saying that not all of the data was great, but the key metrics, in my opinion, were initial jobless claims coming in lower than expected and retail sales coming in better than expected. Many market participants have recently been worrying about a potential recession. And while the risk of a recession is not completely off the table, today's retail sales numbers definitely helped calm market participants' fears of recession, at least for now. As I've been saying in recent videos, NVIDIA's price action between now and earnings on August 28th will be largely dependent on the rest of the market. If the market can just remain calm for long enough between now and August 28th, then I think NVIDIA still has room to move higher in anticipation of earnings. And today that once again has proven to be true, as the S&P finished the day up 1.7% and NVIDIA closed about 4% higher on the day. Now I want to mention a few important developments on NVIDIA's chart. As I mentioned a couple videos ago, we have a nice cross on the MACD on the daily time frame, which is very encouraging to see. And then in yesterday's video, I told you that we were preparing to test two very important moving averages, the 180-day MA on the 4-hour time frame and the 50-day MA on the daily time frame. The 50-day MA is the purple line on your screen. Both of these moving averages are very important, and they are watched closely by many traders and investors. And well, today NVIDIA broke above both of those moving averages, which is very encouraging to see. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, my ideal scenario would be for NVIDIA to have a clear break above both of these moving averages, and then to come back down to test the moving averages as support, and then move higher from there. That would be the ideal scenario. Will that happen? Time will tell. Right now, we are trading inside of supply zones on both NVIDIA and the SPY's charts. These supply zones were marked well before today, and I'm not surprised that price action stalled out in these zones today. Remember, supply and demand zones are areas in which a supply and demand imbalance has previously occurred, and so these zones are areas in which reversals are more likely to occur. However, I do not buy or sell simply because price moves into these zones. Rather, I pay attention to how price action and volume interact with these zones in order to make better informed trading decisions. So after having a nice strong green day in the market and considering that we're trading inside of supply zones on both NVIDIA's and the SPY's charts, it is possible that we could see some slight red action in the short term. However, it really does depend on the rest of the market. We get more economic data tomorrow morning, and so the market could react one way or the other depending on the results of that data. If we see some slight red action in the short term and NVIDIA comes back down to test the 50-day MA as support, then I would not really be concerned about that. Ideally, we would get a brief retest of the 50-day MA as support and then move higher after that. At least that's the ideal scenario in my opinion. Will we see that happen? Time will tell. Long term, I am bullish on the future of NVIDIA as more hyperscalers like Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, Alphabet, and others increase their CapEx spending on AI by billions of dollars. If NVIDIA's latest chip Blackwell is delayed, that does not really concern me regarding NVIDIA's long-term future. If Blackwell is delayed, then NVIDIA can simply sell more H100 GPUs in the interim since demand is so great right now, and then they would likely just guide higher for future quarters in which they expect Blackwell to ship in volume, and investors would be very happy to see higher forward-looking guidance from NVIDIA. In the short term, anything could happen, and NVIDIA's price action between now and August 28th will be largely dependent on the rest of the market. If the market pulls back, it will weigh down on NVIDIA, and by that same token, if the rest of the market can simply remain calm between now and August 28th, then I think NVIDIA still has room to move higher. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some slight red action along the way, especially right after having a strong green day like today. With all of that being said, I hope you're all having a great day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.